how do y'all all get along, the black conservatives of your generation? And I've seen some beef before with homegirl from Baltimore.
Kim Klacik.
Yeah, Kim and Candace, but that feels like a very specific beef. I don't want to get. I'm not messy, so I don't want to get into that. But in general, behind the scenes, is there a lot of agreement? Is there tension? Is it like, you know what I mean? We have a united front, but behind the scenes, we disagree.
I mean, that's a great and that's a fair question. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of different personality differences. There are some of them who don't like me. Some of them think that I'm too liberal because there's things that they want me to be so just legalistic and by the book about that I'm not. So yes, there is tension between certain black conservatives. There's a handful who don't like me. There's some that don't like me because my stance on Israel. Because, you know, obviously Candace, she is not the biggest fan of Israel, and she is the beacon of black conservatism these days. So there's a lot of people who are so on her side about that they hate me, even though Candace and I don't have any beef, obviously. Well, I shouldn't say obvious, but Candace and I don't have personal beef. But a lot of people who support everything that she says about Israel, they have issues with me. So yeah, there's plenty of tension behind the scenes. But overall, we have a decently united message.
You mentioned Candace, and let me ask you, forgive me, I'm seeing online people identifying you as queer. Do you self-identify as queer?
No.
Or gay or LG or anything like that?
I just think it's weird that people are in my sex life.
I have no interest in your sex life. I'm only and if I respect your if you don't want to answer that. The way it was presented online was that was part of your public persona and your public identity. The reason why I was asking it was because you mentioned Candace, and she's very clearly said being queer is a sin, being gay is a sin, it's a sinful life. You know, you're not following God. Do you share that perspective? Take you off the table. Do you share that perspective?
I mean, if you're looking from a biblical perspective, then my understanding of what the Bible is saying, then yes. But I also see this is where I get into a fight with certain black conservatives where they'll say that they'll talk about gay marriage, for example. I say that my personal perspective on it is there is a difference between a biblical marriage recognized under God and following what the Bible is teaching versus the legal institutionalized contract and binding of what marriage is. So when I say that
Like a civil union.
Yeah, well, yeah, essentially. So when I look at a same-sex couple, it's like I believe that they have the right to get married. That's what America's about. We're about freedom.
But I'm not asking about, I respect, I'm not asking about marriage. I'm saying she thinks that like two gay people in a relationship is a sin, or certainly them having sex is a sin. Do you agree with that?
Yes. I mean, it is. I mean, just like having sex before marriage is a sin, but that doesn't mean that I'm condemning it. I can say that something is a sin and still be fine with somebody's ability to do that. I will protect somebody's ability to sin just because that's what America is for. I can differentiate church and state in that regard. A lot of people just don't want to in the conservative movement, and that's where some of the disconnects happen as well. And I can understand why. I can understand why people only want to go off of what the Bible says. But when I'm looking from a legal standpoint, I'm able to differentiate between a legal standpoint and your moral standpoint. And when it comes to America, I am a Christian. Yes.
Okay.
But that being said, I don't expect everybody in our country to be a Christian. And I don't expect everybody to follow that standard. And that is where a big disconnect happens in the conservative movement in general, beyond just the black conservative movement.
Yeah, I think I think that happens on both sides. By the way, I think there's all kinds of contradictions and tensions in making assumptions about people's values and also imposing certain sort of values without pushing it. So I ask that because that's one of the places of tension I find in among black conservatives. That some are hardcore, like, you know, thou shalt nots, you know, no sex before marriage, no being gay, no masturbation, no all these things. And I often wonder among black conservatives who are queer, I'm not saying you, I'm saying who are, you know, sort of how they feel, if they feel comfortable being in those spaces, or you know, drug use or whatever the thing might be. You know what I mean? It's a very interesting thing to see those kinds of tensions in that place. Could you see yourself ever voting for a Democrat?
I could. See, this is one thing that has grown since I've started making content. I started making content in February of 2021. When I left the left, it is so because I felt the left was a cult. What I realized within about a year of being on the right can be a cult too. So what I am not trying to do in my career, because I would love to have a career with longevity like yours, I am not trying to be a part of any cult. I'm not trying to be just unwaveringly loyal to one group or to one movement, because if their values stop aligning with mine, then I'm not going to continue going that way. So if there is a Democrat who shares my values that I'm aligning with, and I think that they're leading our country in a better direction, or my state or wherever it is, I'm fine voting for a Democrat if they earn my vote. But more often than not, that just hasn't been the case yet. I would also I actually won't say that, but if they're a more moderate Democrat, like a Kennedy style Democrat, I would be open to voting for them.
Fair enough. Fair enough. When are you running for office?
Never.
Smart man. They used to ask me that, and I'd say never. It could change, but as of now, it's still never for me. How can people get a hold of you? I want people who want to consume your content to know where to find you.
Again, thank you for having me. Most of my platforms are just my first name. It's a regular spelling. It's Xavier, Xaviaer. My Instagram, my Facebook, TikTok are all at Xavier. My Twitter is at Xavier D.
I love that. I love that. Xavier, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Sometimes I talk to conservatives, occasionally liberals too, but it's usually conservatives because we don't agree.